The rock shattered my driver's side window at 3 in the morning. I jolted out of bed, heart hammering, and ran barefoot to the front door. Cold air slapped me in the face as I flung it open. There, under the yellow glare of my porch light, stood Karren Temple, the president of our HOA, with a smug look and a landscaping rock still in her hand. "Too many weeds, Travis," she yelled, pointing at my lawn like a courtroom prosecutor. "You've been warned." I stared at my busted truck window, then back at her. "Are you out of your mind?" She didn't answer. Just turned on her orthopedic heel and walked back to her house like she hadn't just committed property damage on camera. And yeah, I had a camera. A Nest Cam, mounted right above the garage, and it had caught the whole thing in crisp HD glory. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was up against a woman drunk on power in a subdivision run like a dictatorship. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I'm Travis Norwood. I'm a mechanic, not a lawyer. But after 10 years of dealing with Karren's nonsense, I knew how to read bylaws and dig through county codes like a pro. I'd been fined for having a garden hose coiled the wrong way, for parking half an inch over the sidewalk, even for visibly drying laundry, once on a clothesline behind a privacy fence. It was ridiculous. But until now, I kept my head down and paid the stupid fines. Not anymore. I spent the next morning reviewing the footage. There was Karren, in her quilted robe and slippers, waddling up my driveway with a landscaping rock in both hands like she was about to perform an exorcism on my truck. She hurled the rock, it smashed the window, and she actually stood there admiring her work for a second before yelling about weeds. I downloaded the footage, backed it up twice, and drove straight to the local police station. The officer at the front desk took one look at the video and raised his eyebrows. "Yup," he said. "That's criminal mischief. Maybe even vandalism." "You want to press charges?" "I want her held accountable," I said. "If I broke her window, I'd be in cuffs by now." He nodded and started the paperwork. While the criminal case was in motion, I filed a claim with my insurance. But the deductible was over $1,000, and I wasn't about to pay that when I had video proof of who did it. So I did something Karren never expected. I filed a civil suit. She got served at the HOA's monthly meeting. I wasn't even there, but word spread fast. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree with texts from neighbors. Apparently, Karren had exploded when the process server walked in mid-speech about enforcing community integrity and handed her the envelope. She went red in the face and started screaming about how you were harassing her. "One of my neighbors, Camila, told me later. Said you were bullying her." Like, seriously? I didn't respond. I was too busy preparing. Karren wasn't just a bad neighbor, she was a tyrant. The HOA board was made up of her friends, and they operated like a private club. They changed bylaws on a whim, handed out fines like candy, and ignored anything that didn't suit them. People were scared to push back. But now, someone finally had. A week later, I was walking out of my garage when I found a bright orange sticker on my front window, one of those violation, immediate action required slips the HOA loved to slap around like confetti. This one said my lawn was unsightly. Thing is, I just mowed it the day before. I pulled the sticker off, marched across the street to Karren's house, and knocked. She opened the door halfway, arms crossed. "You're violating HOA standards." "Yeah? And you're violating the law," I said, holding up the video still I'd printed out. Her face mid-yell, "Rock airborne. Hope you've got good insurance." "You don't scare me," she said, voice low and venomous. "You think the board'll side with you?" "Don't need the board," I said. "Got a judge." She slammed the door. The court date arrived 2 weeks later. I showed up with my video footage, repair bills, and a folder of HOA violations she'd hit me with over the years, most of which I'd already contested or paid under protest. Karren strutted in like she owned the place, flanked by 2 of her HOA cronies, Marla and Joyce, who whispered furiously behind her like mean girls at a high school lunch table. She tried to argue that I provoked her, said my lawn was an invitation to vermin, and that she acted in the best interest of the community. The judge wasn't buying it. "Miss Temple, did you or did you not throw a rock at Mr. Norwood's vehicle?" "I was defending neighborhood standards," she snapped. "That's not a defense under the law," he replied dryly. "You committed vandalism. You'll reimburse the full cost of the damages as well as court fees." "And the car?" I asked. The judge looked at me. "You're requesting asset forfeiture?" "I am," I said. "She caused over $5,000 in damage, and she's refused to pay or accept responsibility. Her vehicle is worth about that. Karren's jaw dropped. You can't take my car. That's my property. So is my truck window, I said. The judge leaned back. Given the footage and Ms. Temple's refusal to settle this matter amicably, I'm granting temporary seizure of her vehicle pending full restitution. She screamed. Like, literal scream. High-pitched, echoing down the hallway scream. The bailiff had to guide her out, red-faced and shaking. But it didn't end there. The day after the court ruling, I noticed something weird. My mail was missing. Packages I'd been waiting for didn't show up. I checked with the post office. They said they'd been delivered. I installed a second camera. 2 nights later, I caught Marla Karren's right-hand stooge sneaking up and stealing boxes off my porch. I turned that footage in 2. By the end of the week, both Karren and Marla were under investigation for harassment and mail tampering. And still, Karren wouldn't stop. She started issuing fines to anyone who talked to me. Camila got a notice for excessive porch decor after she brought me a casserole. Another neighbor got fined for unapproved flag display because he put up a garden gnome in solidarity. That's when the neighborhood hit its limit. Camila started a petition. Within 3 days, over 2/3 of the residents had signed it demanding Karren's removal, a full audit of HOA finances, and a third-party mediator to oversee the process. They submitted it to the county housing board. And that's when things really blew up. The county board didn't waste time. 2 days after receiving the petition, they dispatched an external compliance officer to our subdivision, a guy named Marcus O'Malley, sent straight from the Department of Community Oversight. He showed up in a navy windbreaker carrying a clipboard and a weary expression, the kind only someone who'd seen too many miniature dictatorships hidden behind picket fences could wear. I was rotating tires in my driveway when he walked up. You Travis Norwood? He asked. Depends who's asking. I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. He handed me a card. I'm here to review allegations of HOA misconduct. Looks like you got the ball rolling. I nodded toward Karren's place. She's the one with the crown. He didn't smile. I'll need a full statement from you. And access to any HOA-related documents you've collected. I led him into the garage, where I'd set up a folding table with 3 binders stuffed full of records, meeting minutes, duplicate fine notices, contradictory bylaw amendments with no dates, and copies of emails showing selective enforcement. I'd kept everything. Not because I'd expected this day, but because I knew people like Karren didn't just stop on their own. O'Malley flipped through the pages without saying much. Then he pulled out a page and held it up. Did the board actually approve this landscaping inspection policy? Nope, I said. It was added after a closed-door meeting. No resident vote. He jotted something down. That's a procedural violation. And this clause here, the one about moral presentation standards, who wrote that? Karren, in a newsletter. She used it to fine someone for having a mural on their fence. He gave a slow whistle. That's unconstitutional. I figured, I said. But most folks didn't know how to fight it. He closed the binder. They will now. Across the street, Karren stood behind her curtain, peeking out just enough to see him standing in my garage. She opened her door a crack and shouted, "That man is trespassing on HOA property unless he has board approval." O'Malley didn't even turn. "Ma'am, if you step outside and speak to me directly, I'll explain who I am." She slammed the door so hard, the porch wreath fell off the hook. By the end of the day, O'Malley had requested access to the HOA's financial records, past election ballots, and security footage from the community clubhouse. Karren and her board tried to claim the materials were private, which only made him dig deeper. The next morning, he returned with a subpoena and a laptop. He caught me watering the sidewalk cracks, where grass had started pushing through. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always got one for someone who makes tyrants sweat." He opened the laptop. "I've reviewed the HOA's bank statements for the past 4 years. There's a recurring payment to someone named J. Temple Consultant. Any relation?" "Her husband," I said. "He hasn't worked since the early 2000s. Said he was between ventures." O'Malley shook his head. "He's been getting $2,000 a month for community strategy services. That's nearly $100,000 paid without resident approval." I leaned on the fence. "So, embezzlement? At best, misappropriation. At worst, fraud." Before I could respond, Camila jogged up the sidewalk, holding a manila envelope. "Marcus, I got the clubhouse logs you asked for," she said, handing it over. "They've been hiding them in a locked drawer labeled Decor Inventory." He took the envelope. Thank you. She turned to me. You hear what they did to the Johnsons? No. They revoked their pool access pass. Said their teenage son had inappropriate hair. I sighed. Of course they did. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's a direct violation of the public amenities clause in their own charter. She'll just rewrite the charter, I said. She's done it before. Camila crossed her arms. Not anymore, she won't. That afternoon, the county board scheduled an emergency hearing at the community clubhouse. Flyers went up on every mailbox. The title was simple: Review of HOA Governance, Resident Attendance Strongly Encouraged. By 6 o'clock that evening, the clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of pinned-up frustration. Karren sat at the front, flanked by Marla and Joyce, all three of them stiff as mannequins. Karren wore a blazer with shoulder pads like she was preparing for a corporate coup. Her lips were pressed so tight they'd practically disappeared. O'Malley stood at the podium and opened with a question. How many of you have received at least one HOA violation notice in the past year? Nearly every hand went up. And how many of you appealed those violations and received a fair response? Only 2 hands remained. He nodded. We've reviewed financials, complaint records, and bylaw amendments dating back 5 years. What we've found is a pattern of selective enforcement, unapproved spending, and procedural manipulation. Karren stood up, voice sharp. These accusations are baseless. We've operated entirely within our rights as elected officials. You weren't elected, someone shouted from the back. You ran unopposed after disqualifying everyone else. O'Malley raised a document. Indeed, we found that 3 candidates were removed from the ballot without due process. 2 of them had more than the required number of nominations. One was told his handwriting was too informal. Karren tried to interrupt, but he held up a hand. Ma'am, you'll have a chance to respond. But first, I'm placing the current board under provisional suspension pending a formal audit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You can't do that, Joyce said, standing up. I already did, O'Malley replied. Effective immediately. The community will vote on a temporary board next week. Until then, a mediator will oversee operations. Marla muttered something under her breath. Karren shot her a glare sharp enough to slice glass. When the meeting adjourned, people lingered in clusters, talking for the first time like neighbors, not prisoners in a gated fiefdom. Someone brought a stack of donuts. Kids ran around freely, no longer worried about being cited for disruptive activity. It felt like a switch had flipped. I was heading back to my house when Karren intercepted me near the mailbox. You think this is over? She hissed. You humiliated me. I kept walking. You did that to yourself. My lawyer's going to make you wish you never. You already tried that, remember? She stepped in front of me. I built this neighborhood. I kept it clean. You're just a grease monkey with delusions of grandeur. I looked her dead in the eyes. And yet, I'm the one who brought you down. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Just a furious wheeze. I stepped around her and walked away. Back at my garage, I opened a cold soda and sat on the tailgate of my truck. The air smelled different, fresher, somehow. Across the street, Camila waved from her driveway. A few houses down, the Johnsons were hanging lights along their porch, grinning like they hadn't in months. For the first time in years, things felt right. And I wasn't done yet. 3 days after the emergency hearing, Karren's sedan was hauled out of her driveway on a flatbed truck. She stood in her yard, arms folded, eyes fixed on the tow operator like she was willing the bolts to come loose and drop the vehicle mid-lift. The operator didn't say a word. He'd seen her type before. The kind who thought eye contact was currency and silence was surrender. The neighborhood watched from porches and driveways, quiet but present. No jeering, just quiet vindication. A few people filmed from behind curtains. Not for social media, but insurance. In case she tried to claim the car was stolen or the flatbed dented her driveway. I didn't watch the whole thing. I had other plans that morning. The mediator assigned by the county, a retired housing attorney named Leonard Tate, had called for a volunteer orientation at the community center. With the old board suspended, someone had to help keep things functional. It wasn't glamorous mailbox keys, parking space appeals, pool access codes, but after a decade under Karren's thumb, people were lining up to help. Even folks who used to avoid eye contact at the mailbox were showing up with clipboards and thermoses. Leonard was already there when I arrived, sorting paper ballots into stacks across a long folding table. He had the kind of calm that made you wonder if he'd ever been truly angry in his life. Maybe once, in traffic, and even then he probably just hummed through it. "You're Travis," he said as I approached. "I've heard your name more times than I've heard my own this week." "Not sure that's a compliment," I said, taking a seat across from him. "It is." "You shook the tree." He slid a paper toward me. "I need someone with common sense and a working knowledge of the bylaws to help draft a resident code of conduct. Think you're up for it? Only if I can add a clause about not hurling rocks through windshields." He didn't laugh, but the corner of his eye crinkled. We worked through the morning, drafting a document that emphasized transparency, due process, and resident participation. No legal jargon. No vague morality clauses. Just clear expectations and a mechanism for appeal. It was the kind of thing the old board would have buried in a subcommittee. By the time I got home, there was a letter taped to my front door. No envelope. Just a single sheet of paper with my name written in blocky, irregular handwriting. I unfolded it and read the first line. "You think you've won, but this neighborhood will rot without order." I read it twice, then put it in a Ziploc bag and dropped it off at the sheriff's substation. The deputy on duty took one look at the handwriting and muttered something about handwriting analysis and harassment charges. I didn't need to ask who sent it. There were only a handful of people who still believed Karren's way was the only way. The next day, Leonard called a community meeting to elect a transitional board. 5 seats, open ballot, no campaigning allowed on HOA resources. Just names and qualifications. A few folks nominated themselves. Camila ran. So did a retired teacher named Mr. Reinhardt and a young couple who just moved in last summer. They didn't promise the moon. They promised access and accountability. I stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, watching the neighborhood rewire itself in real time. No shouting. No grandstanding. Just people trying to fix something they hadn't realized was broken until someone smashed a truck window and called it civic duty. As the ballots were counted, Karren lingered near the exit. She didn't speak to anyone. Just stood there, jaw tight, watching her kingdom redistribute itself. When the results were announced unanimous in favor of the new board, she left without a word. That night, I checked my security cameras again. No movement. No rocks. Just wind in the branches and a dog barking 2 streets over. The new board got to work quickly. They froze all fine collections until each one could be reviewed. They posted scanned copies of every financial record on a shared drive. They even held their first open Q&A in the park, using a folding table and a megaphone someone pulled from a garage. People brought their own chairs. Someone passed around lemonade. It felt less like a meeting and more like a reunion. Leonard asked me to join the policy committee. I told him I'd consider it. A few nights later, I got a knock on the door. Not pounding, just a single knock, followed by silence. I opened it to find Joyce, one of Karren's former allies, standing on my porch with a manila envelope under her arm. She didn't meet my eyes. "I shouldn't be here," she said, "but I can't keep quiet anymore." I stepped aside, wordlessly, and she walked in. She handed me the envelope. Inside were handwritten notes, meeting transcripts, and a USB drive. She kept 2 sets of books, Joyce said, sitting stiffly on the edge of my couch. One for the board, one for herself. I didn't know until last year. By then, it was too late. I flipped through the pages. There were payment logs for consulting, personal reimbursements labeled community morale, and receipts for luxury items marked as office supplies. One charge for a $1,000 espresso machine. Another for a 3-night stay at a spa resort. "Why now?" I asked. Joyce clasped her hands tightly. "Because she threatened my daughter. Said if I didn't vote against the audit, she'd find a way to get her scholarship revoked. Said she had friends at the university." I leaned back in my chair. "You think she was bluffing?" "I don't know. But I'm done protecting her." The next morning, I handed everything over to Leonard and O'Malley. They reviewed it, verified the receipts, and contacted the State Housing Authority. A formal investigation was launched within the week. Karren's house went dark. Curtains drawn. No visitors. Her husband disappeared from the neighborhood entirely. Rumors swirled, bank accounts frozen, subpoenas delivered, a possible indictment. But no one celebrated. Not out loud. The damage she'd done wasn't just financial. It was cultural. She'd made neighbors suspicious of each other, taught people to fear their own front lawns. The new board moved quickly. They reversed every invalid fine, reimbursed those who had overpaid. They even created a fund to cover legal costs for residents who had been targeted. I didn't take a penny. I told them to put mine toward fixing the community garden Karren had shut down for being aesthetic clutter. A month passed, then another. One afternoon, I got a call from the sheriff's office. They wanted me to appear as a witness in the fraud case. I said yes without hesitation. In court, Karren looked smaller. Not physically, just reduced. Like someone had drained the venom out of her and left only the skin. Her lawyer tried to paint her as misunderstood, said she had dedicated her life to maintaining a high standard. The prosecutor wasn't having it. She maintained a high standard of theft, he said, pointing at the screen where her expense reports were being projected. She used community funds like her personal wallet. That's not stewardship. That's exploitation. I testified for 15 minutes. Just the facts. The rock, the fines, the forged policies, the financial trail. When I stepped down, I didn't look at her. The verdict came back in 2 hours. Guilty on 3 counts: fraud, misappropriation of funds, and harassment. The sentence was probation, restitution, and a permanent ban from holding any position in a homeowners association in the state. It wasn't dramatic, just final. Outside the courthouse, Leonard met me on the steps. "You did it," he said. "No," I replied. "We all did." He nodded. "Still, you started it. That matters." We shook hands. No cameras. No press. Just 2 men who'd seen power misused and pushed back. Back in the neighborhood, things had changed. Kids rode bikes without being chased off the sidewalk. Lawns were a little wilder, in the best way: more character, less conformity. People waved more, talked more, trusted more. The new board held monthly cookouts. Not mandatory, just casual. Bring your own chair, bring your own story. At one of them, Camila handed me a slice of pie and said, "You know you're a legend now, right?" I shook my head. "I'm just a guy who got tired of paying for silence." She raised her fork. "To noise, then." And we dug in. The wind rolled in heavy and warm that evening, thick with the scent of creosote and distant rain. The kind of desert storm that teases more than delivers. I was out back patching the edge of my shed roof before the clouds decided whether they were serious. Strips of tar paper lay like peeling bandages across warped plywood. I had one hand on a staple gun when I heard a car roll to a slow stop near the front of my house. I climbed down the ladder and walked around the side yard, wiping sweat off my brow with the edge of my sleeve. An unfamiliar sedan idled at the curb. The driver's window rolled down, and a man in a button-up shirt leaned out with a cautious smile. "Mr. Norwood?" "That's me." He stepped out and held up a folder. "I'm with the state restitution office. I came to confirm delivery of the final payment." He handed me the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. Not a massive sum, but enough to cover the broken window and then some. The balance Karren still owed after the court-ordered seizure of her vehicle had finally cleared. Not from her directly, of course. From the insurance claim she'd been forced to file under pressure from her new attorney, one who didn't share her flair for melodrama. The man lingered, eyes scanning the street. Word is, she's planning to move. Quietly. Out past the edge of the county line. Someplace with no HOA. I didn't ask who told him. Word traveled fast in our neighborhood now, but not in the old, whisper down the driveway way. It was cleaner. Honest. People weren't afraid of being overheard anymore. "Thanks for bringing it out," I said, folding the envelope and slipping it into the back pocket of my jeans. "You didn't have to come in person." He smiled without much behind it. "Let's just say we don't trust the mail for anything involving Ms. Temple." The car pulled away quietly. No fanfare, no notices, no clipboard-wielding watchdogs. Just gone. That night, I took a slow walk down the block. Porch lights glowed warm behind screens where families sat chatting or watching late TV. Wind chimes clinked faintly, and someone grilled something spicy that made the air bite. I passed the old community board by the park. The new one had replaced the plexiglass cover and added a cork strip for personal notices. Job postings, babysitters, pet-sitting services, and a flyer for a neighborhood chili cook-off pinned dead center in cheerful red letters. Camila spotted me as I cut through the edge of her yard. She sat on a woven hammock strung between 2 stubby Palo Verde trees, a paperback dangling from one hand. "You hear she's leaving?" she asked without looking up. Was bound to happen. She's not telling anyone. Just packing up at night, a box or 2 at a time. Marla hasn't been over in weeks. I think even Joyce won't answer her calls. I leaned on her fence. People like that need an audience. She lost hers. Camila marked her page with a receipt and sat up. You think she'll try to start fresh somewhere else? New neighborhood, new victims. She might, I said, but she'll be slower next time. Paper trails follow people longer than reputations. She tilted her head. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't had that camera? Every day. She nodded, thoughtful. You're a mechanic. You ever fix more than you meant to? I gave that a second. Yeah. You go in to replace a belt, and you end up rebuilding half the intake. By the time you're done, it runs better than when it rolled off the lot. That's what this place feels like now. Like we found problems we didn't even know we had, and now it actually works. I didn't say anything. Just let the breeze fill the silence between us. The following weekend, the new board organized a cleanup of the old HOA office. It was a converted storage room beside the clubhouse, once locked and labeled administrative use only. Leonard brought his grandson to help haul out the filing cabinets, and Camila showed up with coffee for the whole crew in mismatched thermoses. Inside, it was a time capsule of mismanagement. Duplicate files under different names. Receipts from as far back as 15 years ago, some dated before the HOA had officially formed. A drawer full of expired parking permits from a company the board had never contracted. There were even faded photos of Karren posing next to signs she'd insisted were community-funded, but had clearly been vanity projects. Reinhardt found a small safe in the back, half buried under old banners and unused violation slips. It wasn't locked. Inside were 3 checkbooks, a portable label maker, and a gold-plated name badge that read Director of Integrity. Someone let out a snort laugh, and it echoed around the room like a ghost finally getting the joke. We boxed up what needed to be stored, shredded what didn't, and made a pile for public review. Anything involving resident funds or decisions was scanned and uploaded to the new digital archive Leonard had created. Everything else went into a bin labeled Historical Curiosities, which everyone agreed should be kept around for perspective. Later that week, I got a letter from the city. Not a fine, not a warning. An invitation. Apparently, Leonard had nominated me for the Neighborhood Liaison Committee, a rotating group of residents who advised on local policy, infrastructure, and municipal planning. I read the letter twice before setting it down. The next day, I stopped by Leonard's place. He was in his garage tuning a shortwave radio, the static clicks and chirps echoing off the walls. I got your letter, I said. He adjusted a knob and looked up. Didn't think you'd say yes unless it surprised you. I'm not used to being trusted with things that don't have an engine. That's exactly why you should do it. People who fix things tend to know when something's about to break. I didn't answer right away. Just watched the needle on his radio jump between stations. You know what she said to me the day of the court ruling? I finally asked. He shook his head. She said the neighborhood would rot without her. Leonard chuckled, dry and low. Funny thing about rot. Sometimes it clears the way for better growth. I left with the letter still folded in my hand. As summer deepened, the streets grew louder with life. Kids on skateboards, chalk drawings on the sidewalks, porch concerts with old guitars and off-key harmonies. The community garden was back open, this time with an actual budget. Someone painted a mural on the clubhouse wall, bold shapes and bright colors, a neighbor's teenage daughter who'd once been fined for graffiti-style art. Now it was the centerpiece. Karren's house eventually sold. Quietly. A real estate agent with a polite smile and no knowledge of the neighborhood's history put up a modest sign and held a single open house. A young couple from out of state bought it within a week. They waved when they moved in. The kind of wave that said they didn't know the past and didn't need to. Just neighbors, looking forward. One evening, I walked past the house. The new owners had planted native grasses along the edge, wild and a little unkempt. I smiled. No one would find them for it now. Back home, I checked the camera feed on my laptop. Still running, though lately all it caught was the occasional cat or tumbleweed. I left it on anyway. Not out of paranoia. Just habit. Proof, if I ever needed it again, that the truth has a way of catching up. I poured myself a drink and sat on the tailgate of my truck. The same one that had once been a target, now just a vehicle again. I watched the sky darken into that deep violet you only get when the clouds flirt with lightning but never commit. The wind picked up. Somewhere, a screen door clattered shut. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood didn't feel like a place to defend. It felt like home.